welcome to today's video. For today's video, we are going to be building a shipping container home. This isn't anything novel or anything like that. It's just a build that I've been wanting to do for a while, so I figured why not take the time to do it today. So for today, as always, it's a base game build. So the first thing you'll probably notice is there aren't actually any metal textures that would have worked for this build in base game alone. So yes, in Tiny Living there is some textures that would work out great because they made it with shipping container homes in mind as well. But in base game we don't have that luxury, so instead we're using some wooden paneling that kind of looks, if you really squint at it, like it could work. And for the roofing, we actually did have some metal roofing, so that worked out great. Now, some of the edges were kind of weird, so what I did to get around that was I basically made a floor on the top of the containers, and that way I was able to get some trim around them and make it look a little bit more complete. Now, for this house, I didn't really have much of a plan besides the fact that I wanted it to be shipping containers, and that I didn't want to stray too far away from the idea of them being shipping containers. So there aren't any containers that I will fully open, for example, but there will be some that I'll add one door going from one to the other and make it a bathroom or split them up, stuff like that. So as for the textures on the inside as well, I had in mind, well, maybe they use some wooden flooring that they could afford all around, since the idea behind shipping container homes is also the cost. So I started going with cost in mind, and at one point I started throwing some more things here and there that I figured are a bit more expensive, but they could have bought it down the line, something like a bigger TV and things like that. So the main idea was these would have been containers that were pretty much put together one by one. Maybe the area was expanded little by little, which I did consider doing that as well, but I didn't really want to make a gameplay out of it, so I figured might as well build the whole thing instead. So with that in mind, all of these levels will have things like the same type of flooring and all that, whereas I was also considering if the metal flooring would be carried on the inside, as well as perhaps some walls didn't get any drywall in them. But at the end of the day, most of them were painted over, since it wouldn't really make sense insulation-wise. Even if you live in a country that the weather doesn't fluctuate that much, I don't think it would have still been very wise to not have a lot of this insulated, and maybe one wall here and there that could have been more of a feature wall. Since if we're being realistic, weather changes are still a thing. Even if it's just rain, it probably wouldn't be a very good idea to keep some of the metal on the inside without being protected, considering that this is your home. It's not just a shipping container anymore. It is now a place where you want to live. Now, one of the things I did was make a diagonal shipping container. Now, at first, I was thinking it was going to be a pain, but it ended up working out really well, since for some reason, when you make things diagonal in The Sims, you tend to get more space than you would if it wasn't a diagonal build. So for example, I had a bit more real estate to work with in the kitchen, and I really took that to the full advantage, and I got a kitchen and a dining room in one of the shipping containers, whereas if you look at some of the other shipping containers, I can barely fit in a bedroom, or I can barely fit in a bathroom. Granted, that one bathroom is also a hallway, but we'll get there when we get there. The idea behind building this as well was I kind of wanted to make a house that was very pokey here and there, whereas this one wasn't as pokey as I was imagining, since I was thinking a house that had more and more extensions going through, but a container home is kind of the same way. So what I wanted to do to make it a little bit more of a challenge was I did not use any move objects in this house. Now, I was actually quite surprised at what you could do without move objects on. I did click on the F5 key though, so that allows you to place items in quarter tiles, and I think it was taking it a bit too far by letting me place some things. One of the examples of this that you'll see upstairs in the hallway was I had put a chess table, and I had also put a bookshelf up there. I had no idea how it let me place that, considering I didn't have move objects on, but that was definitely in the way of the sim. And don't worry, I did playtest absolutely everything in this one, since I was sure that some things were going to break even without move objects on, since the F5 quarter tile placing was seeming a bit sketchy. So one of the things that I did in this one was I had basically an inner courtyard where I considered making that even bigger, but I really wanted it to be covered by the roof, which would just be a container that is on top of it. So that would at least make a bit more sense in having separate living areas being the same house, basically. So working around that, every other area in the house was a bit out of whack, if you ask me, since the living room ended up being very narrow, and that's the thing with a lot of these container homes, especially if you're trying to do it in a way where you're not tearing down the walls to make the house work. At the end of the day, though, I was really happy with how this house ended up. It seemed like one of those houses that you can tell was really lived in. Even with how pokey some things were here and there, though, I was really happy with the end result of this house, since I feel like it's one of the few houses that I actually got some more color than I'm used to. And it also seemed to have pretty much everything that I've been avoiding in a lot of my other builds, such as a computer and a TV. Now, it hasn't been on purpose, it's just been the theme of what I'm going for. But I really liked how the colors ended up in this house. I really like having a lot of different colors on the outside as well. And the very, very end, I cut out a lot of it like always. But I had a lot of landscaping going on here and there, which took me forever to place, since, again, it was without move objects, yet you could scale down and scale up and still use items that way. So the way I got around it was I scaled down a lot of the bushes just to be able to place them around the blank areas that were going to be left if I hadn't done that. So it was a really nice challenge to be able to build something based off of what The Sims considers a container size, since at the very beginning you might have seen that I did base this off of some debug containers. And go along with that, see what you can build, have move objects off, and see what you can build with that. There's actually a lot you can do, yet there's a lot that I wanted to do that I couldn't without move objects. Especially when it comes to decorations or where you want to place certain things, since it's things that I know will work if I were to place it in a different way, but at the end of the day, the part of the challenge was to not have move objects on. So with all that, I decided to have some green areas, since for now everything is grassy. But the idea of this is that it would have been a plot that wouldn't originally been very grassy. It would have been a lot of gravel instead. So I decided to do a green terrace upstairs as well. And that is basically the workshop, I guess you could call it. So with that area, I believe I got most of the skills covered. Some of the things that I didn't add though were instruments, since a piano would have been ridiculous in this house. I don't know if any other pack has it, but I wonder if there's any upright pianos, since I'm pretty sure the only ones that are in the game, at least in base game, are grand pianos. And that doesn't really make sense if you ask me, since not a lot of houses would be able to fit a grand piano. Either way, besides the instruments, I believe we have pretty much all the skills covered. There's some cameras around, there's an easel, there's a pool. Either way, besides instruments, we do have pretty much every other skill covered. And outside, I even decided to put a little bit of a backyard, which again, I decided to not just include the whole thing, since this is a scenario where perhaps the whole property isn't yours. If this is something that someone with Tiny Living is downloading, for example, there would be lots where this would make perfect sense, especially if you're by the pier, I believe it was. That one, I'm pretty sure you would want a lot of your areas to be a bit more private. But anyways, we are getting close to the end of the video. So what do you think of this one? I think it turned out pretty good for being one of the few container builds that I've done. I'm not too sure at this time if I've done any other ones for this channel, but I have tried to build some on my own before, and I am pretty glad at how this one turned out in comparison to some of the other ones. Angles and not putting things straight on top of one another will be your friend when building containers. But anyways, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think down below, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a great weekend.